song really support our subject today, forgiveness. I want to start out with a story. A couple of years ago, I'm trying to think, 2 or 3 years ago, a friend of mine and I met. I was trying to think if he initiated it or I did. But anyway, I knew that my friend was engaged in a divorce. I actually thought it was one of those model divorces. Actually, we've just come off of a series on the blessing of anger, and anger really helped him. He had gotten into, what would you say, that, the word's escaping me. I'm just going to sit here for a second, let it come to me. The momentum of life. Ego loves to carry us into that which is known, and it's easy to fall into a momentum. And while he and his wife had been married for a long time, they really weren't in relationship anymore. They were more like roommates. And he wasn't really considering that. And then 2 things happened that really made him angry. And anger, remember we talked about you don't want to live from anger, but whenever we're angry, it's a great opportunity to look at what's off here, what's out of balance, what's not working in alignment with my soul. And that's what he got from these 2 experiences of anger. He realized, oh, I'm not really feeling alive and met, nor am I really wanting to engage with this person that I call my wife in the way that we used to. And so he started a conversation with her. Didn't come in and say, all right, we need to get a divorce, but started being in the question with her. And you can imagine, at first, it was difficult. But after a couple of weeks of them talking about it, she also began to see that their relationship was no longer serving her either. And they began the process of talking through a divorce, a separation. And they were, working at it from all angles, how they were going to separate their assets. At some point, she found a house that she wanted to have, and they decided it would be best if she owned that house free and clear, so they liquidated all of their non-retirement assets to buy her this house, and they put a house they had up in the mountains on the market. Everything was going well. About 2 months after she moved into her new house, they had talked also about the fact that they were free to date if they wanted to, and he came to her probably just a few weeks before we had met and said that he had been dating someone, that it felt serious. He wanted to be integrity with her. Integrity's a big deal with my friend. And just after he told her that, like 2 days after that, a high-powered divorce attorney approached him, through email or letter, saying he was now going to be representing his wife and that they were being called into court. And in court, he was informed that all of their assets would be frozen, that he was responsible for continuing to pay all of their monthly bills as he had. He's the sole support of their relationship until this divorce had been settled. In some ways, that all seemed fine to him. He assumed his wife wasn't talking to him at that point, but he assumed that it had something to do with the fact that he was dating and that was bringing up some pain for her. But then something happened that he wasn't expecting. In their first credit card bill, his wife spent the equivalent of his entire salary, charged it, which is challenging because the court had ruled that he not only needed to pay the credit card, but the mortgage on his house, the 2 car payments, their health insurance, and all of her living expenses in her new house. And so they had a little bit of savings left over after buying her this house, but only enough for him to get through 1 month of paying that credit card bill. When the second credit card bill came of equal amount, he paid all the other bills, but he financed some of that bill on the credit card. His wife monitored that, and the minute she saw that he did not pay the whole amount, she reported him to the court. And he was informed by the court that he was in contempt of court, and if he didn't rectify the situation in the next few days, that he would be going to jail. I think all of us have found ourselves in situations where we felt betrayed, where we felt like the situations were unjust. Can you relate? I know I can. Yes. And the question I have for you is, did you respond? Was your first response forgiveness? Come on now. You could let us know in the chat. You don't have to give us the details, just a simple yes or no. And I'm expecting there'll be a lot of no's. And I say that because so often when something really hits up against us, it's the ego that responds first. And it would not be the ego's natural way to be into forgiveness. Remember, the ego plays such an important part for us when we're kids. It is the very mechanism that lets us survive, because the things that happen day to day in life are a lot for a kid. And so the ego comes in and it uses different techniques. It uses repression, suppression. It layers up all sorts of ideas over things that hurt to try and cover them up. It develops defenses so that we start blaming life, or we shut down. It's got a whole toolbox that helps our undeveloped nervous system get through our childhood. The challenge is that it continues to thrive in most of us well beyond childhood. And that is the first response. It wants to hold on to, right? It wants to hold on to resentment. It takes a natural stance of, hey, if I'm not on guard, then I'm going to be victimized. I'm the victim here, and you're wrong. You are the bad guy. Luckily for us, and there may be, you can imagine, there's probably several people walking the planet that would think that my friend's former wife should not be forgiven for what she did. But luckily, there's a lot of support, maybe even we could say pressure, to forgive. Our culture talks about forgiveness a lot. Certainly our spiritual traditions do. Even psychological traditions really support. Lots of studies coming out saying that the lack of forgiveness is hard on our health, hard on our mental state. And so there's a lot of support for us to move forward. But one of the challenges is that we're often not taught about true forgiveness. I think about the forgiveness when I was a kid, and I have been struggling. What the heck would you call that? And then I listened to an interview of Colin Tipping, and he said that you can think of it as let bygones be bygones. And I thought, yep, that's exactly it. That we're being asked, without processing any of the hurt or the pain inside of us, we're being asked to simply, quote, let it go. And really, that's impossible. It was fun that Colin said, you're being triggered into feeling like you're the victim, like everything was unfair, and you're being asked to convince yourself and convince the other person that it was fine. Really, didn't really matter that happened, when it's still very much alive in us. And we're really asked to not make it alive in us. Well, let's just layer it up again and pretend that hurt is not there, that really didn't impact us the way that it felt like it did. I always love the pauses. Well, sometimes I don't love the pauses. Seems like a good time to pause. Let's take a breath together, shall we? And then someone like Colin Tipping comes along. And by the way, what Colin is teaching is not new. Janice worked with his material about 15 years ago. I was introduced not to his material, but to the same concept when I was in ministerial school in 1994, was when my first class on this happened. And I want to say, because Janice mentioned this last week, and it occurred to me that the situation that was going on in my life at that time that I worked through, I found this work very difficult because I wasn't oriented towards turning within, taking the deep dive. Colin's work invites us into, hey, while there's great support in our ego and great cultural support that you are the victim, that the truth is that there is something divine. I was listening to an interview and you said, are you willing to accept that there is a divine process involved in this? That something is really trying to be worked out for you? Like, think about it. When you think about one of those things in your life, maybe you've got something going on right now where you're really feeling victimized, where you feel hurt, where you feel betrayed, whatever the strong feeling is. Are you willing to consider that something divine is being worked out in you? And what would that be? You're being invited into healing something deep-rooted in you so that you can be free. Free to be the light, free to hear the guidance, free to step out in confidence with your life, to experience a more fulfilling and satisfying life. Not one where you're just always navigating so that your issues don't get pushed and so you don't feel like a victim. No, you want to be free of that. Are you willing to consider that something divine is being worked out right here in your life? And how does that work? It's really the process of love. You know, I was thinking about it, I thought, what is it in me that has become so alive with always being curious about when my buttons get pushed, what's going on here? And as I sat with it, I realized it's love. And it's really a self-love. And Charles Fillmore, and of course, by the way, it was a team effort to figure this out during the first service. I can tell you that Charles Fillmore died in 1948. I had the year wrong during the first year. But Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, co-founders of Unity, they were kind of surprised, actually, at the reception to these spiritual principles that they had come to know through the living of their life, this practical Christianity. And they put together a correspondence course. And as we were looking at it and considering it after first service, probably in the 20s, in the 1920s. And in that, Charles Fillmore addressed a lot of people had been coming to him who were feeling that they wanted more of a sense of light in their life. And, you know, what does that mean to want more light? It's really wanting to be more connected to your spiritual nature, to who you are as a spiritual being. And so in response to that, Charles wrote this: they have put out their light by clinging to some old grudge or giving up to passing waves of anger and hate and jealousy. Now, I just want to pause there for a moment and point out that anger, hate, and jealousy, these are all defense mechanisms of our ego. All of those say the problem is out there, and I'm going to push the problem away, or I'm going to become less than out of my jealousy. Whatever it is, the invitation is not there to take a deep dive, right? But Charles goes on to say, the light will come when love is allowed to shine and shed its brightness upon all. Then there will be no occasion of stumbling, but the demonstration, whatever it may be, will be made every time. And we want to pay attention to that the demonstration will be made every time, that when we can allow ourselves to open to our nature as love, then we're given the strength and the support to go in, and this is a self-love, to see what needs to be freed up in us so that we can live the full potential of our lives. So, what Colin is really purporting is the RAIN process. Oh, he's got more steps or different steps and different names for it. But you see, we're holding this whole trend through the whole year. Spring program, we talked about the RAIN process. Tara Brock's process of beginning to first recognize that we're triggered by something, that something hurts, then allowing the feelings to come up. Colin says it's imperative, if we're going to truly heal, that we need to be in touch with the feelings. And then, after we're aware of the feelings, then we can investigate. Where'd this come from? What's the source of this in us? And finally, nurture ourselves, love ourselves, accept this state of calming and peace that can come across us, and really begin to live from that. With regard to my friend, I was tracking right along with him, right? That when he said, I told my wife that I was dating, and he told me a response, I was feeling compassion and tracking right along. And then when he started going into the more punishing and mean-spirited behavior, I was able to say to him, what are you feeling with your wife's behavior? And I want to just point out that this conversation did not go as clean as I'm going to express it here. You know, immediately he said, why are you bringing up me? This is what my wife is doing to me, you know. And again, this is how easy it is to fall into the momentum of the ego. We know our egos. Our egos love to play the victim and make it someone else's fault. But eventually he was able to say, yeah, her behavior right now leaves me feeling totally powerless. And I asked him, what's familiar about this powerless feeling? And it took him a while. We went back through several different experiences. But finally, he hit to his early childhood. And he said, I was born with a learning disability. And as much as I tried, and I applied myself over and over again, I always seemed to be set back, I never seemed to get ahead, and I never got what I wanted. It was an incredibly powerless feeling. And I knew that we had gotten to something real, that the truth of this situation wasn't as much about what his wife was doing to him and how nasty she was. It was that the situation was reminding him of something very painful from his childhood that he had formed a deep-seated belief about, a belief that really overshadowed his life, that no matter how hard he worked, he would never get what he wanted. He would never get ahead. And as he began to just allow himself to feel that, and to feel the pain. And we spent some time reality checking that, because he actually lives an incredibly prosperous life, a beautifully open, and he's brilliant at his career, and he's financially remunerated for his brilliancy. He just began to see him soften and come back into himself. And by the time we finished, he was a totally different person. He was alive. As we went into this conversation, he was oscillating between situational depression, depression caused by experiences in life, not clinical depression, and anger. all of that seemed to have faded away. And during the conversation, he had shared with me, this could go on for months. So let's go back to Charles Fillmore's quote and the last sentence. Then there will be no occasion, let me see if I can find it. Then there will be no occasion of stumbling, but the demonstration, whatever it may be, will be made every time. So, 2 weeks after I met with my friend, he texted me and said, I'm divorced. Yahoo! And I texted back and I said, I thought you said this could go on for months. And he said, 2 days after you and I met, 2 days after you helped me see that this was really a deep issue for me and what that issue was, I heard from my wife's attorney saying that they were ready to settle and that she settled for basically everything that we had agreed on beforehand. And she even went so far as to pay the attorney fees out of her half of our settlement. This is what Charles Fillmore is saying, that when we can lead with love, when we can lead with the curiosity of love, that it brings about demonstration. Now, Charles Fillmore, if you read Charles, he's a little bit black and white. This for sure will happen. I really appreciate Colin Tipping's comment when he said, more often than not, when we're willing to do our work, it impacts the people in our lives, it impacts the people around us. I would go so far as it impacts the overall consciousness of society. It truly feels like a miracle. But we know spiritually that life works very differently than what the world tells us. That it's important for us to do our work. And so we're just kicking off 7 weeks of focusing on radical forgiveness, on really learning that forgiveness is not about, well, what did he say? Let bygones be bygones. It's actually a true pointer that there's something in you and I that needs to be healed. And that we can do that by our willingness to practice. And through practice, we come to start to recognize more easily what the underlying belief, the underlying pain is, allowing ourselves to go there, to feel it. The feeling brings about a healing. And as that healing happens, to be freed up, to live our lives as fully as we possibly can. Colin makes an interesting point in the book. I tend to focus on the fact that the ego is a structure in us. It's tenacious. We really need to work with it. And I don't want you to hate it, but I really want you to, be watching for it. And Colin says, well, yeah, there's that viewpoint, but there's also the viewpoint that your ego is really working right with your soul to bring you to a greater freedom, to a greater healing, that it is a true supporter of you. I think it's good for us to recognize that it is helping us see how painful it is to live separately from our nature and to feel separated from our fellow human beings. It requires that we make a shift in our thinking, that we open up to that beautiful, inquisitive, connecting nature of love, and allow ourselves to fully be healed in the moment. As Colin said, Are we willing to accept that there is a divine process involved in this? I want to invite you to join me in taking some time now in meditation. And I invite you to allow yourself first to take a few deep breaths and to become centered, grounded here in this moment. I just put my feet down on the ground, allowing my feet to be a support to me. As we open again to this question, are we willing to accept that there is divine process involved in the very things that get under our skin? That God loves us so much that we are being invited to heal. And can we allow ourselves to feel the feelings involved in the situations that we're in? To feel the heartbreak, to feel the powerlessness, to feel the anger, to feel the collapse, and to allow that then to be a portal into the process of inquiring as to what is the source of this. Where did this pain really come from? And to recognize that it's not some big intellectual process, simply the willingness makes a space for Spirit to reveal. Truly, God is in charge. And so we sit together now in the silence, allowing God to be God in us.